Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Within the last hour, the Labour MP Chris Williamson has been suspended after telling a recent meeting of activists his party had given too much ground in its handling of complaints of anti-Semitism. Mr Williamson, who has already apologised, says he deeply regretted the comments and has vowed to clear his name. Our Deputy Political Editor John Pienaar has this report, which does contain some flash photography.
They don't come more loyal to Labour's leader than Chris Williamson, or closer politically, or today much more embarrassing to a party accused of tolerating anti-Semitism after a video came to light of the MP hitting back.
The party that's done more to stand up to racism is now being demonised as a racist, bigoted party. And I've got to say, I think our party's response has been partly responsible for that. Because in my opinion, I never have, I've got to say, we've backed off far too much. We've given too much ground. We've been too apologetic.
It was the kind of outburst that's cited by critics, like the MPs who quit Labour last week with tolerance of anti-Semitism high on their list of complaints. Today, Labour first announced an investigation into Chris Williamson, but the pressure to suspend him grew quickly.
These are not views that I would expect to hear from any member of the Labour Party, never mind an elected representative. He is bringing us all into disrepute. He is tarnishing the reputation of the Labour Party. He needs to go.
Chris Williamson tried and failed to avoid suspension. He said in a statement, "I deeply regret and apologise for my recent choice of words. Our movement can never be too apologetic about racism within our ranks." But he said there'd been very few cases of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, though those few are too many. The response was swift. Labour's deputy leader, Tom Watson, said his long-winded and heavily caveated apology was not good enough. "If it was in my gift, I'd have removed the whip from him already." And the pressure seemed irresistible as the man investigating Labour's handling of anti-Semitism joined over 30 MPs demanding Chris Williamson's suspension.
Today is a very serious day. The Labour Party is being hugely damaged by allegations of anti-Semitism. I am incredibly keen to help as much as I can in dealing with that, but there needs to be an earnest of good intent from the party.
The pressure and the evidence became too much, and Jeremy Corbyn's ally was suspended, whether the Labour leader wanted to or not. Now the pressure on Mr Corbyn over his handling of anti-Semitism can only grow. John Pienaar, BBC News.
But away from Brexit, the Labour MP and ally of Jeremy Corbyn, Chris Williamson, has been suspended from the party pending an investigation after he apologised for suggesting Labour had given too much ground in the way it responded to complaints about anti-Semitism. The party said it was investigating a pattern of behaviour by Mr Williamson. Well, our political correspondent Michael Crick is here with me. Michael, you've been following this avidly all day, so take us through it.
Well, there were cheers and wails of delight, interestingly, from a group of Labour MPs in Portcullis House, one of the public areas of Parliament, this evening when the announcement was made a couple of hours ago. And what's interesting about this story is this is the second time in the last 48 hours that Labour MPs have managed to persuade the leadership to change their mind on a significant issue. We saw it, of course, earlier in the week with the question of the second referendum, now on Mr Williamson. Also interesting, a new rejuvenated role for the Deputy Leader, Tom Watson, for some time seemed a rather diminished figure. He was to the fore today and insisting that if we were going to stop more MPs defecting to the new independent group, and particularly Jewish MPs, strong action had to be taken against Williamson, although it took some time for it actually to happen, and it wasn't until about 5 o'clock, as you'll see.
So the Parliamentary Labour Party has lost one more MP, only this time a close ally of Jeremy Corbyn, Chris Williamson, who's been suspended. The cause, this video of a speech he made last week saying Labour had been too apologetic about anti-Semitism.
The party that's done more to stand up to racism is now being demonised as a racist, bigoted party. And I've got to say, I think our party's response has been partly responsible for that. Because in my opinion, I never have, I've got to say, we've backed off far too much. We've given too much ground. We've been too apologetic.
All day, Jeremy Corbyn faced calls for action from some of his shadow cabinet.
All the MPs I've spoken to today are absolutely disgusted. The trade union movement is disgusted, and he's damaging the Labour movement, and I hope that the leadership take the action that they need to take.
Former leader Ed Miliband tweeted that Williamson was bringing the party into disrepute. It was a test of seriousness, he said, about how Labour tackled anti-Semitism.
This morning, Channel 4 News spotted Mr Williamson as he came through here, Portcullis House, on his way to Jeremy Corbyn's office. And Mr Williamson bumped into Ian Lavery, the chairman of the National Labour Party. And Mr Lavery gave Chris Williamson a big hug.
Corbyn's office told Williamson to apologise, so he did. I deeply regret, he said, and apologise for my recent choice of words when speaking about how the Labour Party has responded to the ongoing fight against anti-Semitism inside of our party. Deputy Leader Tom Watson tweeted that apology wasn't enough and that Williamson should be suspended, a line picked up by Theresa May at Question Time.
What we've heard sums up Labour under their leader. They lose the honourable member for Liverpool Wavertree and they keep the honourable member for Derby North.
Then Labour announced an inquiry into Williamson's pattern of behaviour. Not enough for Jewish MP Margaret Hodge, who urged he be suspended.
Is it really anti-Semitic to say the Labour Party should be less apologetic? Isn't that really just a tactical matter?
Let me just put it to you this way. Just imagine that the racism we were talking about was racism against some black or ethnic minority group or somebody with disabilities. The world would have gone ballistic.
When Labour's Parliamentary Committee of senior MPs met behind these windows this afternoon, all 10 members said Williamson should be suspended. So did 38 other MPs in a letter. Finally this evening, Corbyn gave in to the huge pressure from the party.
Michael Crick reporting.
In the middle of all the upheaval around Brexit, the biggest political issue of our age, Labour is still trying to shake off claims of anti-Semitism. Those claims have been given more weight by a video of an MP claiming the party had been too apologetic over those claims. The MP, Chris Williamson, himself apologised, but when the row failed to subside, Labour suspended him.
One of Jeremy Corbyn's most ardent admirers, it's not the first time Chris Williamson has sparked outrage for dismissing claims of anti-Semitism in the party. But his comments in a video in which he said Labour had been too apologetic in its approach proved too much for many, even in the end his leader.
You know, the party that's done more to stand up to racism is now being demonised as a racist, bigoted party. We've backed off far too much. We've given too much ground. We've been too apologetic.
There was applause, but the timing couldn't have been worse, coming a week after 9 MPs resigned from the Labour Party, partly in protest at Jeremy Corbyn's handling of anti-Semitism. Margaret Hodge, one of many who wrote in protest, demanding he be suspended.
Just imagine if he'd said that about the Labour Party's gone too far in fighting racism against black and ethnic minority people or against disabled people or gay people. That would have been intolerable.
In a statement, Chris Williamson said, "I deeply regret and apologise for my recent choice of words." But soon, Tom Watson, the deputy leader, was also demanding action. "I formally request that Chris Williamson has the Labour whip removed from him," he wrote, and/or is suspended from the Labour Party. 5 hours later, Labour announced that Chris Williamson had indeed been suspended. Ian Austin, who resigned on Friday, said it was long overdue.
Not before time, but look, I think he shouldn't be. I think there should be no place for somebody like Chris Williamson with the views he holds and the way he's gone out of his way to cause offence for years to Jewish people.
But a party member who shared a platform at the event with Chris Williamson defended applauding his remarks.
I think the party needs to root out anti-Semitism wherever it is, wherever it arises. But it mustn't be used as a political tool so we can undermine it.
Can I ask why you applauded that sentiment, though, when he said it?
I've just told you that.
Jeremy Corbyn may have been reluctant to suspend Mr Williamson, but it seems he was left with no choice. Libby Vina, News at 10, Westminster.
And the issue of anti-Semitism has led to a Labour MP and close Corbyn ally being suspended from the party this evening. Chris Williamson was shown in a video posted today and obtained by the Yorkshire Post, telling a momentum meeting in Sheffield that Labour had given it too much ground over the issue of anti-Semitism. Williamson was not initially suspended, despite outrage from senior figures in the party, such as Dame Margaret Hodge, and leading to doubts that there is zero-tolerance policy towards anti-Semitism. And only after the Deputy Leader, Tom Watson, intervened was action taken against the Derby MP. Well, Bill Esserton, as I say, is going to stay with us to discuss that. But first, here's Nick Watt again.
This summer, we're hitting the road, travelling across the country to talk about democracy in the Labour Party.
Pugilistic, pugnacious and always ready to defend his leader, Chris Williamson is the ultimate Corbynite who takes on all comers. A few weeks ago, a grateful Labour leader paid tribute to the man he regards as a tribune of the people.
Chris Williamson is a very good, very effective Labour MP. He's a very strong anti-racist campaigner. He is not anti-Semitic in any way.
But this afternoon, Chris Williamson was suspended from Labour after saying the party is overreacting to claims of anti-Semitism.
And I've got to say, I think our party's response has been partly responsible for that. Because in my opinion, I never have, I've got to say, we've backed off far too much. We've given too much ground. We've been too apologetic.
Initially, Chris Williamson was allowed to remain in the Labour fold after apologising. His suspension came after an initial review and strong pressure led by Tom Watson, the party's deputy leader.
Chris Williamson has produced a long-winded and heavily caveated apology. It's not good enough. If it was in my gift, I would have removed the whip from him already.
Tonight, Chris Williamson reiterated his apology and vowed to clear his name.
Well, obviously, if I've upset anybody, it's the last thing I wanted to do, and maybe I could have chosen my words, differently. And if people have been offended by that, then obviously I want to apologise for that. The last thing I want to do is hurt or upset anybody. As I've said, I'm a dedicated anti-racist campaigner, and I wouldn't want anybody to think that in any way, shape, or form I'm minimising the abhorrence, the cancer of anti-Semitism, and that's why I'm absolutely determined to clear my name about these complaints which have been made about me.
The suspension of Chris Williamson is a big move by the Labour leadership, apparently carried out with some reluctance. But nearly a year after the Jewish community gathered here in Parliament Square to warn of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, iconic Labour figures called on the leadership to act.
I think he had no option but to immediately suspend him, and I was pretty angry during the day that it took so long to get there. I raised the matter with him directly. But I know others did too, and I wrote to the Chief Whip, and I'm delighted that the action of myself and others in the party have led to him finally taking a decision he should have taken first thing this morning.
But the veteran Jewish Labour MP, who accused Jeremy Corbyn this summer of being anti-Semitic, stands by those remarks.
For a long, long time I defended him, but I have just seen too much in the actions, not the words, which have demonstrated to me that he belongs in that group of people who can't distinguish between support for Netanyahu and being a Jew, and who get muddled with this anti-capitalist and pro-American feeling that all of us Jews are pro-American. We're all dirty capitalists making pots of money.
So Chris Williamson was initially not suspended, and the Labour Party said they were serving him with a notice of investigation into a pattern of behaviour. That's what they did with you, isn't it?
It's dead easy to find out the pattern of behaviour, because Chris Williamson had form, and you could have done it by Googling him in 2 minutes. Secondly, it made me really angry to say that when they giving me a notice of investigation was equivalent to giving Chris Williamson a notice of investigation. They gave me a notice of investigation for calling out anti-Semitism. They gave Chris Williamson a notice of investigation for being anti-Semitic.
A former Labour MP who launched a breakaway group in protest at alleged anti-Semitism in the party is alarmed by the video.
It's Jew baiting in terms of the activities that he's chosen to pursue, and he's done it consistently despite this being brought to his attention on many occasions. So I think his behaviour is completely unacceptable.
Luciana Berger was highly critical of Labour's response.
What is the threshold? We were told, the country was told, members of the Labour Party were told that there would be a zero tolerance approach taken to contending with issues of anti-Semitism within the party, and it takes a 12-hour news cycle and significant scrutiny and exposure for the party to now be seen to be taking some action. It's what they should have done at the very, very beginning. I just don't think it's acceptable, and particularly it's not acceptable for a party that is supposed to have at its core those principles of equality and anti-racism.
The head of a Jewish Labour group which supports Chris Williamson believes the reaction to his remarks showed people are being overly sensitive.
I think there's become such a fear about talking about Israel and talking about anti-Semitism, they're not necessarily linked, that people are just not saying anything anymore. And Chris Williamson's one of the few people who actually says what he thinks. When you think about other issues, even Brexit, there's no stopping people. You know, we know every night on the radio and in the flesh that people are saying what they think, and they're not being told because they said it, they must be xenophobic, they must be racist. But on anti-Semitism, there's been almost a silence from everybody. Chris Williamson has been brave, and look how he's been treated for being brave.
A fighter for the Corbyn cause, Chris Williamson now faces a personal fight to save his Labour career.
Well, Nick Watt is still here. Nick, tell us more about Jeremy Corbyn's involvement in his movements today.
Well, a senior Labour figure told me that Jeremy Corbyn was heavily involved in the initial decision not to suspend Chris Williamson, and that all changed after a meeting of the Parliamentary Committee. This is the weekly meeting between a group of the Parliamentary Labour Party and the Labour leader. Jeremy Corbyn wasn't there today. He was on the front bench for the EU debate in the House of Commons, but a very clear message was passed on to his representative. There was uproar, he was told, in the Parliamentary Labour Party. Tom Watson, the deputy leader, is massing forces, I'm told, was a message. And there may have been a few defections last week. How about if there are 70 defections? Watch out.
So he was facing that, so it was a rearguard action.
Pretty strong stuff. And I'm told that Nick Brown, the chief whip, was pretty much involved in helping them to persuade them to change their minds. Told that by a member of the shadow cabinet, who also told me that the leadership is now very worried by this breakaway group, the independent group. And John McDonnell has been passing on messages to Jeremy Corbyn saying we need to watch out for them. They're on 18% in the polls at the moment.
Nick, thank you very much. Well, Labour's Bill Eston is still with us. First of all, Bill Eston, what do you make reaction to Chris Williamson's suspension today?
We were absolutely right to investigate, and after the investigation, the suspension was implemented as well. I think that's the right thing to have done.
To take Nick Watt's point there, that the initial idea in the morning, led by a group, presumably the leadership, including Jeremy Corbyn, was not to suspend, and then because of this fear of defections, the decision was changed.
Yeah, well, I don't recognise that version of events. But look, what I do need to say.
Would you like to have seen him suspended immediately?
What I do not want to say is I understand the anger. I understand the feelings of people in the Jewish community. My family, my grandparents came here in the early part of the 20th century. Some of their relatives stayed in Eastern Europe. They lived in villages that no longer exist. We presume they died in the Holocaust. I feel this as well as many people in the Jewish community, and we cannot be in a position in our party as an anti-racist party where we don't deal with, however small a number it is, of anti-Semitic people.
But it seemed that Chris Williamson seemed that he was speaking with impunity at the Momentum meeting. I want to ask you about that.
Well, hang on a minute. He made a comment. He said he suggested we were overdoing this. We were taking this too seriously. You cannot ever take racism or anti-Semitism too seriously. So, this is absolutely the right action that we take.
So, at that Momentum meeting, what should happen to people at that Momentum meeting who were Labour Party members who were clapping and cheering? Should they be suspended too?
Well, I think the party is now holding an investigation into Chris Williamson. I think that inquiry now needs to proceed. If there are allegations of anti-Semitism against other members, they need to be brought forward, and the party should investigate them.
If these were Labour members, should that inquiry be extended to them?
I don't know who they were.
No, but if they were Labour members, I'm asking if they were Labour members.
I can't.
No, I understand that.
But,
I'm asking you if at that Momentum meeting, some of those who were whooping and cheering were Labour members, should that investigation extend to them?
Well, I think if people at that meeting have made anti-Semitic remarks, then absolutely they should be investigated if they are Labour Party members by the Labour Party. We should have zero tolerance. Anybody in the party who is anti-Semitic should leave. It's as simple as that.
Has this all been just too late?
I think we could have done more earlier. I think that's well documented.
And Margaret Hodge says that there's probably dozens should be expelled.
And I think there are other people in the party who need to be investigated as well. That is true. But look, 0.01% of our membership has been investigated. It is a very small figure in the proportion of a membership of 600,000 people. We are still the most anti-racist party in this country.
But when you hear,
we have to be above suspicion. We have to be the very best, and the bar must be set higher for us than for anybody else.
When you hear Lucien Berger saying, you know, this is the latest in a litany of incidents with Chris Williamson, it was Jew baiting. That is a very serious allegation, and she clearly feels it very strongly.
She does, and I said a few moments ago, I completely understand Margaret's anger, and I completely understand Luciana's. And you know, the fact that Luciana felt she had to be forced out of the party is a matter of great.
And is she right? She was forced out of the
regret.
party.
Well, she felt she had no choice other than to leave. I think it's terrible that she had to.
Do you think, I mean, you know, you heard what Nick Watt said earlier, the warning from John McDonnell and others to Jeremy Corbyn that you might say the trickle of MPs so far could become a tsunami of MPs if you don't get a grip with that?
Well, I don't think that is what's going to happen. I think that most people in the Labour Party understand that we have our best chance of getting a radical socialist agenda into government with Jeremy Corbyn as our leader, and that we must stay together to do just that. But we have had a warning, and I think that we are right to take the action that's been taken today. And if there are other people where investigation needs to be carried out, and indeed suspension, then that must happen. And I think this is the start, and it's a step in the right. It's a step in the right direction.
The start.
It's the start of getting it right, and I'm glad we've made it today.
Bill Eston, thank you very much for joining us.